We're at the Lodge in Austin, Texas to play a new structure 5-10 game that takes place every Friday. We buy in for $3,000, that's the max. Some of the other matches stack 5-10 games here get a little out of hand with straddles up to 50 and 100, and they're regularly pots that are tens of thousands of dollars. Today's game is more reasonable and it's capped at a single straddle to 20. We're playing with a handful of familiar faces, including 3-time gold bracelet winner and my business partner at the Lodge, Doug Polk. We begin play just after 11 a.m. 50 minutes in, we're dealt king-queen suited on the button, the straddle's on, onto the gun +1, raises to 75. The opponent's name is Mo. We played with him the day before on a streamed game, and he can be loco. Especially when he's stuck right now. I call. The small blind is a recreational player who wants to join in on the action. He calls. The onto the gun straddler calls as well. We're going 4 ways to the flop in position. Texas heads up. The dealer puts out Queen 9 deuce rainbow. We've got top pair and a good kicker. The small blind and under the gun check. The pre-flop aggressor isn't concerned that he's got 3 opponents. He bets 100. It's unlikely that he's got us beat. We want to keep his bluffs in there because he might be in the mood to blast away, and our hand doesn't need much protection with no flush draws on the board and only 1 over to be worried about. I call. The small blind folds. Under the gun isn't done yet. I've noticed that he's not a folder. He calls. It's down to 3 of us. The turn is the ace of hearts. It's that 1 over that we didn't want to see. Under the gun checks. Under the gun +1 bets 200. I can make an argument for folding now that we're seeing the initial pre-flop raiser bet twice into multiple opponents and we've been downgraded to second pair. Against anyone else at the table, I'd give up. I call one more time because I'm not 100% convinced that Mo's not bluffing. I'm like 7% convinced. Under the gun folds. We're heads up. The river is the 6 of spades. It's a brick that shouldn't have changed anything. Mo fires the 3rd barrel for 550. I really wanted the opponent to check. All we've seen is strength the whole way. He's repping minimally ace-king, but mostly 2 pair or better. In the past when I've seen Mo bluff, he normally goes with a ridiculously large sizing. This sizing is too proper. We can look for a better spot down the line. I fold. It hurts to have to give up, but if Mo's bluffing too frequently in these types of situations, it's only a matter of time before we catch him and punish him. We get the chance for revenge when we pick up King 10 suited in the straddle. It's an above average hand for us to have after putting a blind 20 out there. Mo raises to 75 from the cutoff. There's a well-known sleeveless player on the button. Doug has his camera set up to make some Instagram content. He calls. We've got a great candidate to squeeze with. I make a large 3-bet to 550. If we can get through Mo, we should be able to take this one down without resistance because Doug likely isn't all that strong after only flatting a late position raise. Getting through Mo is a formidable task though. He calls for 475 more. Doug won't be seeing a flop with us. He folds. We're heads up out of position. Plan A to win pre-flop didn't work. Plan B is something that I've only had to use a few times. The flop comes King 6-4 rainbow. We've got top pair and a backdoor flush draw. If the opponent has a king, we're going to be very far behind since he'll probably have a better kicker than us. We don't want to inflate the pot too much if that's the case. If the opponent has a pocket pair like 5s or 7s through queens, he's going to be drawing slim and we don't want to bet too much so that we can get calls from those types of hands that are in big trouble. I down bet to 300. Mo's contemplating different ways to proceed. He takes a look at his cards to check to see if they're different from what he remembered. Mo apparently likes his hand enough. He calls. My general sense is that we're best, but I'm not totally certain. The turn is the 9 of hearts. Pocket 9s improves to a set, and King 9 also steals the lead from us. Hands worse than ours probably can't call bets on all 3 streets, so I check partly for pot control and to see if the opponent is interested in making this pot any bigger. He checks back, indicating that he likely has a 1-pair hand worse than ours. Perhaps he has queens, jacks, or 10s. It's also possible that he could have something like ace-queen suited, and he just called a small flop bet to see if the turn would help him improve. The river is the 6 of diamonds pairing the board. We've only got 1260 left in our stack. The pot is significantly more than that. It's time to rip it for value to target worse pocket pairs.
I'm bringing $1 million.
I know, I heard.
And I'm gonna buy him for 300.
Mo folds almost immediately. He might have taken his time to at least consider calling if he had connected at all with the run out or if he was holding a pocket pair. A few years ago, I probably wouldn't have squeezed King 10 suited. Here it helps us win a much larger pot than we likely would have won if we had just called the pre-flop raise to close the action. We're back to even for the session. It's time for a PLO double board bomb pot. All 7 of us at the table put in $25 each, and we go straight to 2 flops with 10-9-6-4 double suited. The first flop is King 10-7 rainbow. We've got a pair, a gutter, and some backdoor flush draws. The second flop is 9-4 deuce with 2 diamonds. We've got top 2 pair there. Checks to Doug in the cutoff. He makes a small wager of 50. The button calls, the small blind folds. We're not going to go too crazy, but we're going to stick around. I call, under the gun calls, middle position player calls, the hijack also calls. Everyone but the small blind has put in additional chips. We're going 6 ways to the turn. The top one is the 10 of diamonds, giving us trips. The bottom turn is the 4 of spades, giving us a full house. Those are close to the best turns that we could have seen. I'm first to act. Usually I check this to the aggressor on the flop, but with Doug just betting small on the flop and getting 5 callers while we've improved significantly on both boards, we can't count on him to bet again. I take the initiative, leading for 225 to ensure that this doesn't get checked through. The player on our left makes the fold, middle position player folds, the action's on Mo in the hijack. Fun fact about him is he was an Olympic wrestler for Iran in the 60s. I'm actually not joking, it's pretty cool. Mo finds the call, Doug folds quickly, the button announces a pot size raise to 1375. Unless we're up against quads, we've got the best hand on the bottom board. I'm not really sure about the top board. I imagine we're probably not winning there, but it's not impossible. Because we're most likely only going to win the bottom board, it's really important to try to keep the third player in so that we can chop up his money. Otherwise, if I re-raise to the maximum amount, which is only 575 more because there's a 2K cap on how much any player can put in post-flop, the hijack could get scared and will almost certainly fold all flush and straight draws. I call, really hoping that the hijack comes along drawing dead, at least on the bottom board. The hijack has seen too much interest from us in the button. He folds, it's down to heads up. The top river is the queen of clubs, it doesn't help us, especially since some straights get there. The bottom river is the 3 of hearts. It's a great card that doesn't allow any additional combos to beat us. I don't want to check and give the button an opportunity to check back. I lead for 575, which gets us to the 2K cap post-flop. The button calls quickly, we turn over our trips on the top and the second nuts on the bottom. Kind of as suspected, we chop with the button. He has king 10, jack 8. He has a full house on the top board and nothing on the bottom. In this particular scenario, it's unfortunate that he raised so much on the turn because it doesn't end up making either of us any extra money. We really needed that third player in there. Both of us at least still win a few hundred. Next, we've got pocket queens in the under the gun straddle. The hijack raises to 60. Mo's next to act in the cutoff. He grabs chips and calls. The small blind is the same opponent who we got a showdown with in the previous hand. His name is Patches. He 3-bets to 300. Patches could be doing this with a variety of hands that we're dominating. It's not just going to be aces, kings, and ace-king like we might see in a smaller stakes game. I cold 4-bet to 700. The initial pre-flop raiser folds immediately. Mo always takes his time. He didn't have a hand good enough to 3-bet himself, so I'd be pretty surprised if he finds a call now that it's $640 more for him to continue. Mo folds. The small blind doesn't have a ton behind, but he calls, leaving himself with only 1600. We're heads up in position with effectively about 1 pot size bet left. The flop comes king 10-8 rainbow. It isn't ideal with the overcard out there. What's even worse is that it's possible that the opponent could have a set of 10s as well. Small blind checks. The opponent probably would have jammed ace king and kings pre-flop, although I wouldn't completely put it past him to flat the 4-bet with aces and kings given the shallow stack to pot ratio. Still, one of the most likely hands that I put the opponent on is pocket jacks. I make a tiny bet of 400, expecting to get folds from almost every hand worse than ours. If we get any resistance, I'm going to shut things down because it's so likely that I'll have aces, kings, or ace-king in this situation. If he makes any kind of move, it's sort of suicide if he's doing it as a bluff. Despite the flop crushing our cold 4-bet range, Patches wants to play for everything.
Alright, they fold Patrick. You win. We have 10s. Yeah.
The small blind drills a set of 10s to have us drawn slim. Fortunately, we only lose a small amount post-flop. I'm down about 1,000 on the session. Here we're dealt the dreaded pocket jiggities in the cutoff. I can't help but laugh a little in my head every time I look down at them. The straddle to 20's on, as it is virtually every hand. I raise to 60. The small blind has a big stack. He'd like to put it to use. He 3-bets at 225. It's a fair amount. We're certainly not folding. I'm content to see a flop in position with a strong pocket pair. I call for 165 more. We're heads up against an opponent that I've got a decent read on. The flop comes ace 5-3 with 2 diamonds. It's not a very good one for us because there are a lot of suited ace-x hands that the opponent might have 3-bet us with that now have us beat. He continues firing for only 175. I'm not entirely sure that he has an ace. He could still have a number of suited Broadway hands that we're beating, or even lower pocket pairs. I've also noticed that the small blind frequently shuts down his bluffs on the turn if he gets resistance on the flop. Having that observation in my back pocket, I'm more comfortable hanging in there. I make the call in order to see what develops. The turn is the king of diamonds putting another overcard on the board and completing the flush draw. We're not even holding a diamond. The good news is that the small blind checks. There's a decent chance we've got the best hand. I take a stab betting 325. I could have checked back since we've got showdown value, but I wanted to deny equity from any combo that the opponent might have containing a diamond, and we might even be able to get a hand like king queen or pocket queens to fold. Also, in the instances that we're beat and we get called, we can just check back rivers, getting to showdown for a potentially cheaper amount than if we check back turn and the opponent bets river. The opponent quickly folds. Luckily, we didn't face any additional pressure on the turn because that would have put us in a tough spot. We win a significant pot with what could have been the best hand. We're on the comeback trail and only down 500 at the moment. In this one, we pick up ace-5 suited in the small blind. The hijack limps in for 20. Doug's in the cutoff. He calls. Patches is on the button and he's ready to punish the limpers. Patches raises to 100. It was set up well for him to make a play with what could be a relatively weak hand. I basically have no choice but to punish the person who tried to punish everyone else. I 3-bet to 425. I've got a solid image of the table, rarely showing down any hands, and when I have, they've been strong. I should get a lot of credit. The hijack and cutoff fold. The button wants to go another round in the ring with me after he took the first one when he hit the set of 10s against our pocket queens. The flop comes king 6 deuce rainbow. We've got no pair and no backdoor flush draw. Still, king high flops are going to generally be good for me as the 3-better. I bet 250. This single bet may not work all that often to immediately win the pot, and it doesn't. The button calls. He could have a king or maybe some medium pocket pair that he doesn't want to give up on just yet. The turn is the jack of spades. The opponent definitely isn't folding a king, and he could reasonably have a set of jacks. I check. What the opponent does here will be very telling. I'd expect him to bet ace king or better. Instead, he checks back. He might have king queen or king 10 at best, but he probably just has a hand like pocket 8s, 9s, or 10s. The river is the queen of hearts. There are 3 Broadway cards out there. Even though I check turn, I could still have sets of kings, queens, or jacks. I'm going to rep those types of holdings and Broadway as I target medium pocket pairs that have been reduced to 4th pair.
1100.
11.
We get a snap fold from the opponent to win a sizable pot. We relied on our read of the situation to make a play, and it worked out. This one takes us right over the even mark. We're now up a small amount on the day. Feels good to get that bluff through without a sweat. An orbit later, we've got ace queen suited in the small blind. The button raises to 50. We 3-bet a late position raise previously as a bluff. This time, I 3-bet to 225 for value. If you've ever played poker at the lodge, or if you've watched some of the streamed games, you may have noticed that people don't like to fold here. The button calls. We're heads up out of position in a large pot. The flop comes ace 5-5 rainbow. It's a good one for us. We've got top pair, good kicker, and a backdoor flush draw. I bet 150 to keep in combos that we have crushed. The button calls to see the turn. The dealer puts out the 9 of diamonds. It's time to increase the pressure. I bet 525 to get calls out of worse aces, maybe even flush draws if the opponent called our small flop bet with backdoor diamonds. After considering his options for about 20 seconds, the opponent calls. The river is the 3 of spades. It's a total brick. It's tough to get 3 streets of value from too many worse hands, and it's still possible that we're up against ace king or pocket 9s. So I go with the smaller sizing of 700 to hopefully get calls out of ace jack, ace 10, some other type of ace x suited that we're beating, maybe even a hand like queens, jacks, or 10s that just can't fold. The button clearly isn't convinced that we've got ace queen or better. He's taken a long time to think about what he wants to do. I'm rooting hard for a call because we almost surely have him beat. After almost a full minute, the opponent disappointingly folds. I like the guy, so I let him know that he made a good fold as we show that we were betting for value the entire way. At first, I thought that he may have had to make a tough laydown if he had a worse ace of some sort. I'm shocked to hear what he says he actually had and was tanking on the river with.
That ace?
I'm on the buzzer theory anymore.
Just pocket pair?
She had those glasses on. Hey, those weirdo glasses.
King high.
And I'd never seen her wear those.
Your diamonds, I guess?
Yeah, diamonds.
We go on a 2-hour drought without anything interesting happening before we pick up king jack offsuit in middle position. We were up $1,000 after the ace queen suited hand, then lost $1,700, whiffing flops for 120 minutes. I added on for $700, so we're in for $3,700 at the moment, and we're stuck a little. I raised to 50. The hijack, cutoff, button, and big blind all call. We're going 5 ways to the flop. becomes Jack 4 deuce rainbow. We've got top pair and a good kicker. The big blind checks. There's not much to be worried about other than the fact that we've got multiple opponents, so it wouldn't be shocking if someone had ace jack, or pocket fours or deuces, but we're probably best. I bet 110 to thin the field. The hijack folds quickly. The cutoff is less quick to make a decision. He has at least some piece. He calls. The button likes to heat things up. He puts in a raise to 450. It's surprising to see a raise because there aren't any two pair combos that make sense for the opponent to have. He shouldn't have called a pre-flop raise with Jack 4, Jack deuce, or 4 deuce. Also, if he had a set, he'd probably wait until the turn to raise since there aren't any major draws to be concerned about. This is a bizarre spot to be in, and I'm not totally buying the story that the button's telling. The best hand I imagine he'll have is ace jack or maybe pocket queens, but from what I've seen from the opponent so far this session, I'm almost positive that he would have 3-bet pocket queens pre-flop. The big blind folds. We can't go anywhere yet. I call for 340 more, suspecting that we could be up against an ace-5 suited, 6-5 suited, or 5-4 suited type of hand. The cutoff folds. We're heads up out of position. The turn is the king of diamonds. We smash top 2 pair. If we're up against anything other than a set, we're in great shape. I check to the aggressor on the flop. He's not about to let up. He keeps the pressure on as he grabs chips and makes a huge bet of 1100. The button definitely isn't repping queens or ace jack anymore. Again, there aren't any flop 2 pair combos that make sense, so the opponent either has a set or he's bluffing. We don't want to pile more money in when we're behind, and we definitely want to keep his bluffs in if he's drawing dead to a gut shot straight draw or drilling trips. I call. We're probably good. There's no way to know for sure though. This has become a massive pot. The river is another deuce. It shouldn't have changed anything except it makes it less likely that we were up against the flop set. I check with plans to call a bet of almost any size. The button snap checks back. We show our top 2 pair. There's no way it's not good. The opponent sees that he's beat and returns his cards face down to the dealer. We win. I'm really curious to know what the opponent might have had though.
I have you the whole way? No?
Flop, I got 2 pair.
You had 2 pair? You had Jack 4?
I didn't think there was any way that we were going to be up against 2 pair on the flop. As soon as the session ends, I'm going to have to head to the post office to send Robbie a commission check. We win a big pot to be back up 1100 on the day after smashing a fortunate turn card. The stoners will be excited about the timestamp in this one as we look down at ace-king offsuit under the gun +1. I raised to 50. The hijack calls. The cutoff 3 bets to 250. Doug is in the small blind. He cold 4 bets to 550. Wow, there's a lot of action. I was first to act after the straddle, so I'll mostly be opening a narrow range and I shouldn't be getting 3-bet light. I definitely shouldn't be getting cold 4-bet light from out of position. There's a weird situation. Against certain players, I'd fold ace-king offsuit. I've only got $50 invested and I don't have a pair. A lot of people are only cold 4-betting aces, kings, queens, or ace-king. We're not doing well against that range of hands. Doug doesn't fall into that category of certain players we'd fold ace-king to. He's more than capable of finding creative 4-bet bluffs, or even hands he's 4-betting for value that we have beat. I 5-bet to 1200. If we get 6-bet jammed on, we're gonna have to fold. If someone pulls off a 6-bet bluff, not only do they deserve our $1,200 5-bet, I'll give them an extra few hundred from my wallet. Do you remember several re-raises ago when the hijack just called our initial $50 raise? Well, what do you think would be the most surprising play from him now that he's seen a 5-bet? If you said 6-bet rip it, you'd be correct, and guess what? He doesn't do that at all. He folds. He's not a lunatic. The cutoff goes into the tank though. He's casting devious stares in my direction. Now that I think about it, he's probably the one lounging in my chair as well. This surely is a dream. The cutoff finally folds. The action's back on Doug, but not for long. He folds quickly. We show him what we 5-bet him with. Doug shows that he cold 4-bet with ace-jack suited. He's happy that he didn't lose anything more.
We got away from it.
Did Doug say all in?
We win several hundred without having to see a flop. This win gets our stack up to about 5,000. We're currently profiting close to 1,300. In this one, we've got pocket kings in the under the gun straddle. The hijack limps in for 20. He had just gotten stacked a few hands earlier. The cutoff calls 20. The big blind calls. We're gonna make this more. A lot more. I raised it 200. Nearly everyone at the table has shown an aversion to folding. It was time to increase the raise size so that we reduce the amount of opponents that we have in order to make this hand easier to navigate post-flop. The hijack calls, the cutoff and button both fold. We're heads up out of position against someone who's been having a rough day, probably isn't in the best headspace. The flop comes queen 9-3 with 2 spades. It's nice that there's no ace out there to have to worry about. As long as the board doesn't get significantly worse, the plan is to fire all 3 streets. I bet 250 to get things started. With no hesitation from the hijack, he grabs chips and makes the call. We have removal to straight draw combos, making it more likely that we're up against one pair or a flush draw, especially since we don't have a spade in our hand. The turn is the 5 of clubs. Ordinarily, I'd consider this about the blankest turn that we could get, but we're up against the same opponent who called our pre-flop raise earlier with Jack 4. It wouldn't totally surprise me if he had 2 pair on any board anymore. We're moving full steam ahead though. If the opponent does have a queen, he's probably not in the mood to let it go, even if we charge him abundantly. I bet 900. It's almost a pot-sized bet, setting ourselves up nicely for a river shove. The hijack takes a little more time to consider his options now that he's facing a second, much larger barrel. The opponent isn't ready to abort. He calls. There's another enormous pot that we're playing. A blank card would be great. Instead, the dealer puts out the 4 of spades, the front door flush gets there, and so do some obscure straights. The opponent only has $13.95 left in his stack. If I check and he has us beat, I won't be folding to a shove. If we have him beat and I check, he'll be checking back most worse hands that might call our shove when he's getting 3-1 at the end of his rope. I rip it, really hoping to avoid getting snap called. The opponent clearly doesn't have a flush or straight because he's taking his time. He's apparently got a difficult decision, which means we almost for sure have him beat. Part of me feels bad if he calls and loses because he's been getting demolished today. I've been there. I know it's not a good feeling. The opponent turns over 1 card. It's a queen. He has top pair like I wanted. He makes a somewhat surprising disciplined fold.
Oh, thanks.
We win 1 more big pot for the day. Even though we didn't get called, I'm glad that I shoved to try to get some extra value when we had the best hand. It's been an up and down session, but we've got a solid profit in front of us. I'm not the biggest winner though. There ends up being a ridiculous 3-way all-in with players having pocket kings, queens, and 10s. It's a rare 5-figure pot in this game. The flop comes queen 8-5 with 2 hearts. Queens flops top set to devastate the Cowboys. The turn is the 7 of diamonds. It doesn't change anything. Pocket 10s is drawing dead, and kings only has 2 outs. The river is the jack of spades. The second best hand pre-flop gets rewarded, stacking 2 players in the process. It's by far the biggest pot of the day. No one likes to lose, but the other 2 players take it in stride and have good attitudes as their stacks are absorbed by Mo's. Mo is already doing well on the session. This just adds to it. Even though the game is close to as good as it gets with how much action there is, it's been a long day and it's time to rack up. Played for about 7 hours today. I won $1,700 overall, so it's a good, solid win, and I had a great group of guys. Probably one of the best 5-10 games that I've ever played. Tons of action, huge pots, and the big winner today, Mo, there's a 3K cap, and he just cashed out for about 20,000, so he just crushed it. Just won that huge 3-way all-in with the queens and cracked kings and beat 10, so that was nuts. But this game's gonna run every Friday. This was the first time we've done it in a while, and hopefully I'll be out here playing it more often. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons because it helps out the channel a ton. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm happy to get back to you. This was one of the best 5-10 games that I've ever played. It runs every Friday, and I'm looking forward to going back there and playing it again. I'll be in Austin for 10 days for the Lodge Championship Series. We kick things off with a meetup game on April 23rd with me, Andrew, Mariano, and a handful of special guests. It's a 1-2 game, so pretty cool low stakes event, and the list is already up for that if you want to put yourself on it. The list is already up for the April 18th Seminole Hard Rock Hollywood, Florida meetup game as well. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a 2-5 game. It'll be me and Vince Van Patten, and I have more information in the description box below. That's part of the WPT Championship Festival that's going on. I'm gonna be firing in that championship tournament at least 3 or 4 bullets if I need to, because last year's first place prize was $1 million, and that's just something it's one of the coolest events of the year. One last event that I'm going to is going to be the Playground WPT. That'll take place in May. We're doing a meetup game on May 14th. I'll have more information in a future episode for that, but all these things I have details on in the description box below. One final announcement is that this is a great time to sign up to WPT Global using the bonus code BRAD for a deposit match bonus of up to $1,200 and more during almost the entire month of April. WPT Global's not taking a rake on online MTTs, which is almost unheard of for a site to do that. So take advantage of that, and hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you're staying safe. Good luck at the tables, and I'll see you next time.